Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of my Let's Play series on the Sforza campaign for Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. I'm Filthydelphia, and as the designer of the Sforza campaign, this Let's Play is a little different from others you may see on YouTube, in that you actually get to see the designer of the scenarios play the scenarios. So I talk about some of the design choices, some of the historical research that went into the campaign, and so forth, so you get a little different experience with this one. Now when we last left off with the Sforza story, in the scenario His Own Man, Sforza had established his own power base in the Romagna region of northeastern Italy. This meant he had his own territory and his own sources of income, meaning that he was less vulnerable to the whims of his employers, such as the Duke of Milan. Now this, of course, brought him to rivalry with another skilled condottiero captain named Niccolo Piccinino. Now we'll get to have a clash with Piccinino himself in the next scenario called the Prodigal Son. We're heading to northern Italy to the Alpine Lakes. We're going to now fight Piccinino. Now, as always, I'm going to play this scenario on moderate. That's primarily just because I'm not the best at Age of Empires, but also I want to be able to spend more mental attention on talking about some design choices, and so I don't want to get bogged down on a particularly hard scenario. So let's dive right into it here.
If Sforza thought taking territory would make him safe, he was a fool. The King of Naples looked hungrily northward to the cities so easily taken by a rogue mercenary. Sforza needed allies. Sigismondo Malatesta came with a Venetian force, as did Sforza's ever-loyal cousin Micheletto. But the condottiero needed a more powerful ally. He took his biggest gamble by going to meet an old friend. You might have thought that when Sforza walked into the Milanese court, that Visconti would have ordered him arrested, or that Piccinino would have personally killed him. But surprisingly, Visconti accepted Sforza like a father accepts his wayward son. Sforza and the Duke's daughter were finally wed, and the implication was obvious. Sforza would rule Milan when Visconti died. Whatever the Duke's intentions, this favoring of the prodigal son incensed Piccinino. He furiously tore his contract and stormed out of Milan. If Visconti would not see Sforza for what he was, Piccinino would find another patron. Pledging himself to the King of Naples, Piccinino had one goal: to destroy Sforza.
There you have it. Actually, as surprising as those turn events may seem, it's actually based in history. That's actually what happened to Sforza. He was welcomed back by the Duke of Milan, Filippo Maria Visconti. Now, in my research found historians kind of debate on why he would have brought him back. I mean, at some level, you may think this may be a sort of, keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of deal, in which Filippo Maria Visconti wanted to keep Sforza close so he can monitor him and then maybe plot his eventual downfall. That may have been possible. Or just maybe he was a bit of a prodigal son, in terms of, as a story in the Bible, the wayward son goes forth and the father, welcomes him back in. Maybe Sforza, Filippo Maria Visconti saw something in Sforza. Regardless, it made Piccinino angry, and so now we're in the Swiss Alps, and we now have the very simple objective to defeat Piccinino. You can see here the hints. Now please, feel free to pause the video if you want to go through and read these hints, as well as scout section here. One thing to note is that trade with the Lombard villages is possible, so that way, one thing we will try to do is take over this lake so we can actually do that trade. This map doesn't have particularly much gold, so that is a good way to get additional gold. Let's dive right into it here.
Cousin, it is time for me to make a name for myself. I will join Malatesta in service to Venice. May our family always triumph, and may your victory over Piccinino be swift.
So there we go, our cousin speaking to us there. We're getting another message from Piccinino in a moment.
We meet again, Francesco Attendolo. But you have no cousin here to help you. It is just you and I.
So basically, Micheletto, our cousin, Micheletto Attendolo, he was also a famous condottiero captain. He's decided, he's been with us the last 2 scenarios, working with Sforza, and he's now decided to venture out and make his own name for himself. He's going to end up being employed by the Venetians. At this point, Piccinino comments, well, it's just you and I. You don't have your cousin here anymore. One thing that may seem a little confusing is why is Micheletto Attendolo the cousin of Francisco Sforza? Actually, Sforza's family's real name was actually Attendolo. Sforza's father, Muzio Attendolo, was also a famous condottiero captain, and he decided to change his name to Sforza because basically Sforza means like force or strength in Italian at the time, and so it was just a way to basically have a kind of a badass name. Like I talked about before, these condottieri captains, you know, they wanted to market themselves as being like the best condottiero captains, and so having a name like Sforza, you know, that means strength, means force, was a way to kind of, I guess, market himself. Kind of like branding in some ways in a modern business context, believe it or not. I mean, again, these were Renaissance Italians, you know, very mercantile cultures, so it kind of made sense to have some care for pay attention to like branding in his name. So while Micheletto and his side of the family still was named Attendolo, Sforza, Francisco, and Muzio, his father, went by Sforza. Some of these wolves here. So this scenario, unlike the last two scenarios that were very, you know, fixed force centered in terms of you had fixed resources, you were fighting against an enemy that, while they may have trained some units, was for the most part a fixed enemy. This is actually the first full-fledged build and destroy traditional scenario in this campaign. It was something I wanted to do, just talked about in the previous scenarios thematically. It didn't really make sense for like a mercenary captain to be worrying about, you know, collecting sheep and wood and stuff like that. And so here for the first time, now that Sforza is kind of on his own and he has his own territory and so forth, now we actually are able to thematically start having it be more of a build and destroy nature. So we open that with a very straightforward, you know, 1v1 kind of situation. This map for the most part is like a Baltic or Mediterranean random maps. That sort of style was obviously made handcrafted, wasn't a random map.
Are you going to try to fight me, or are you hoping that I die of boredom?
But that design choice was deliberate in order to kind of have some space between you and your rival here, an entire sea covering you, entire lake, I should say. And that allowed us to also have to showcase some of the Italian naval combat as well. Piccinino here is actually going to be taunting us over the course of this entire scenario, so it's going to be fun. I hope people kind of enjoy that. That was me wanting to add a little bit more flavor to the scenario by having rival that actually, you know, interacts with you in some ways. That was something I felt was kind of sorely lacking in some of the other campaigns over, you know, Age of Kings and the Conquerors, in terms of having like these dynamic, sort of interesting antagonists. Getting a house here. I'm not paying attention as well as I probably should be. So just basically want to have kind of a 1v1. You'll see in some other campaigns, such as the Avelo campaign, Nogai Khan kind of smack talks as well. Piccinino will smack talk throughout here. He already said, you know, because I want to take my time here, and boom, he's already saying, hey, why don't you come out and fight me? I'm getting bored already. Just I hope that people kind of appreciate some of this, and it kind of adds some color and some flavor to the character of Niccolo Piccinino. And you'll see his sons actually take after their father very much as well. Very convenient here, some cows are coming here. And so, with this being a 1v1, I want to kind of approach this from a sort of like booming angle. Want to build as many town centers as can, just pump out villagers, and basically outproduce his economy. For some reason my farmer is not. Oh, I have a farm there. Okay, he's attacking me with some units. That's fine. I do need some defenses already. Wood is quite scarce. I may just let them take down these towers. See if I can do some damage here with these ships. Some of these crossbowmen back here. Some of these guys collect wood because wood is becoming so scarce here. Take these cows, excuse me. Okay. So I do want to talk a bit about some of the design choices overall. I mean, I mentioned how this is, you know, just thematically, this is a story to make this the first build and destroy scenario of the campaign. But I kind of want to talk about some of the design process more broadly for the campaign. So, I've forgotten, and I need to get some more houses up ASAP. One thing that's interesting in the Spirit of the Law kind of showcased one of his videos is that if you want to build 3 houses, it's better to have one villager build each of them individually than have the 3 build them sequentially. So be a little quicker with this. I also want to get up more town centers here. Nearest gold, so I can just keep pumping out villagers without getting housed. I want to explore a bit more as well. They may be attacking, so I'm going to keep these units here. I know I still have... Oh, there's some more. Get these guys here. I'm going to explore up here. Have this guy explore over here. Have him explore the camp here. I know Piccinino has a couple bases on this map that I need to deal with. Let's fight a village. Just collecting gold as well.
Salve. Quando?
Ein?
Impero? Quando? Presto. Quando?
Why is this fishing boat not doing anything? Just want to get my economy going in kind of a more steady state so I can talk through some stuff. There's some gold that's important. Along here, there's another cow. Ooh, that's not a good outcome. This town center up. I'm gonna take a couple of these guys, try to build and get a market. Let's build some stone as well, so I can keep building town centers. I'm gonna kind of approach this with a booming strategy. Hopefully be able to hold off his attacks long enough. I know he will attack with quite a bit of a navy, so I want to train some more of this. Some more ships here, but I need more gold. Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good now. Got my fish going here. Oh, need more houses. Can't neglect that.
Salve. Rectus. Quando?
Impero? Sane.
You think that you're clever with those fire ships? Let us see what happens when they go boom.
He's not threatening us with demolition ships. You can see kind of, I hope people kind of end up enjoying that little, he responds actually to what you're doing. So that's something that's pretty dynamic about this AI that Piccinino has. Want to really kind of convey that he's a pretty dynamic and savvy kind of TRO captain. So while this is a 1v1 kind of scenario, and he will have a full economy, he's not cheating or anything like that. He will use his villagers and so forth. One thing about him is that he actually will change his unit composition to respond to what you're doing as the player. So I thought it was a nice, twist. It's kind of unique in terms of some of the campaigns. I don't know that many campaigns actually, the AIs in them actually do anything like that. But for example, if I were to train a ton of arbalesters or something like that, he will train skirmishers. If I, as we just saw, if I train a lot of fire ships to handle his galleys, he will start training demolition ships and actually comment on that fact. If I build a castle, he'll talk about it and so forth. So it's just a way that I felt to make the AI feel a little bit more alive. Now, one thing I was never able to actually get do in one of these official campaigns that I actually always kind of wanted to was to have an ally that you play with and have the ally kind of respond very dynamically. The standard AIs actually can do some things. It can actually respond to commands that you give it. And so that was something I always kind of wanted to get an AI in one of these campaign scenarios that did that. Never actually had the opportunity, partially because some of the topics in some of the campaigns were more singular. They didn't really have like lots of like dynamic allies that would have made sense. Like for example, in the Prithviraj campaign, you're primarily playing as Prithviraj and his kingdom in India, as opposed to having like a an equal kind of ally. Keep training some more. Keep my villager production going here. Gold, that's fine, or stone, that's fine. Do you want to build another town center down here? Some nice upgrades. Naval combat's getting kind of heated here. Some more. I need to trade some land units. I talked about before, I want to be placed thematically, so I'm going to concentrate on like archers and kind of TRA, which means I want to get to the next age as well. Oops, I have my monk up here. Oh, this is not a good spot for town center. One thing you'll notice though about the locations, this was something that was a very deliberate design choice on my part, is that I always like having, encouraging the player to be aggressive, and not just aggressive in terms of, you know, fighting the enemies, but also in map exploration, stuff like that. So one thing you'll see in all my scenarios is that I really encourage or entice you to explore, and you actually get rewards for exploring out here. So, you know, if you didn't scout this map, you want to know that there's gold resources here. You know, there were no gold resources in my immediate area when you start. So, you know, I want to encourage players to explore, to be able to find gold. You'll see later on, once I exhaust this gold, that the next gold resources that I can find are in enemy territory. So that's more incentive to advance and take those. And that's something, you know, that it basically jives with, you know, with an actual like combat situation in some ways. And this time, like, the control of resources was critical for an Italian city-state, you know, control of trade routes and stuff like that. So I want to kind of represent that in this scenario by allowing you to benefit from being aggressive and taking out some enemy bases, and that there'll be resource caches there where you can then collect resources. And in fact, if you stay very stagnant and you stay in one spot and turtle, it's not a winning strategy. I mean, you're letting your opponent have all your resources. It's something just like in an RM game. You wouldn't want to turtle entirely, because then you're letting your opponent control the map and collect all the resources, right? And so something I want to kind of convey in this scenario. It does mean that some of my scenarios, some of the campaigns that I've worked on, such as the Almeida campaign, the Burmese campaign, the Benyang, the Burmese campaign, Prithviraj, Ivalo, and this campaign, if you're the type of player that wants to turtle, it can make some of these scenarios actually be a lot harder than intended, because I really encourage aggressive playstyle just in terms of how I design the maps, how I distribute resources and stuff like that. You want to be aggressive. And that's something that really, it fits the tenor of this scenario in particular. Sforza was pretty savvy, pretty aggressive, but also very aware of being tactical in terms of his aggression, realizing when he needed to be aggressive, when he needed to be more defensive, and so that's important in this scenario. So you can see here I'm being a little more defensive here in my immediate base, kind of just withering his repeated attacks, while accumulating a force and accumulating resources that allow me to then eventually take the offensive. I do want to get a castle up, so I'm going to just sell, I have a ton of wood, so I'm going to sell some of that and be able to build a castle here. That'll provide some naval protection as well. Well, I'm having kind of a war of attrition here with his ships. Keep them going. Once I get the castle, I'll be able to advance in age. Send some more. Train some more of these villagers here. Collect some stone as well. We talk about this lake here is actually critical because it's quite a bit of fish that helps my economy out, but also it allows me to eventually trade with the Lombard villages that are here on the east side of the map. These guys out here haven't clicked. It's coming. Come on, castle. Let's put up a university, I think.
Salve.
It's trying to travel quite a bit to get wood, so here. These guys down here. Okay. At least some villagers. Oh, I must have retasked them.
Hide in your castle, you coward. It will do you no good against my cannons.
There you go, more smack talking by our antagonist, Niccolo Piccinino. Okay. At this point, I'm going to advance the
About
Imperial
time you
Age.
discard your pitchforks and shovels and build a real army. I prefer a fair fight anyway.
There you go. I think he's actually correct pitching his Imperial Age as well, so it will be a fair fight now that I'm going to go into the Imperial Age. Now allow me to upgrade my ships so I can start pushing against him and clear the the waters of Piccinino's forces. Now he has a couple bases here. We already saw this castle here. There's actually different passes. I can actually come around the lake this side. There's actually another mountain pass. You can kind of see it here. That kind of also allows me to bypass this base, but I ultimately need to feed him, so I will have to march through here. I can also approach this way, and there's the base here, and it's a base here, and here's where the Lombard villages are, which I can trade with. And I did want to talk a bit, since I'm getting things are starting to come along here. I'm going to talk a little bit about design choices and stuff like that with the scenarios and kind of the process that we go by. In particular, one thing that we've kind of, the Forgotten Empires team has kind of done for the for Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, but this went back to the HD edition in terms of some of the expansions, is we usually give autonomy to a single designer to design each of the campaigns in the expansions. What that meant was for each of the expansions, I had a particular campaign that I worked on. So, for example, for the for African Kingdoms, I designed the Portuguese campaign, the Almeida campaign. For Rise of the Rajas, I worked on the Banyang campaign, the Burmese campaign. And obviously for Last Khans, worked on Ivalo. And then for Definitive Edition, we went back to, redesign some of the old forgotten campaigns. And for this, I worked on Sforza and Prodigal. So one of the things that's very unique to Forgotten Empires, it's very different compared to other companies in the industry, is that we really allowed an individual designer to exercise full creative control. So that meant that besides determining which hero the campaign will cover, that designer did all the research, wrote the story that you see in the slides, writes all the dialogues, designs all the levels. Every piece of these levels is designed by one individual designer. There were some campaigns, such as the Battles of Forgotten, the Leroy campaign, the Yoda campaign, where there were multiple designers that did pieces of those campaigns, usually one designer doing a particular scenario, a different designer doing another scenario. But for the campaigns that were holistically done by a single designer, every piece of the design ends up being created by one designer. So that does mean that you can kind of sometimes see some patterns in the designs. I know, for example, that just, a fan just commented that he could identify, which designers worked on which particular campaigns. You can see commonalities. For example, the designer of the Khmer campaign also designed the Berber campaign. And so there are some similarities in terms of design choices and design philosophy that you see common between those two campaigns. And in fact, some people have commented on how one of the scenarios in the Ivalo campaign, as well as one of the scenarios in the Burmese campaign and one of the scenarios in the Prithviraj campaign, all have kind of very similar construct of being kind of a fixed force scenario where you're traveling from point A to point B, usually through some type of mountain passes, and there's little villagers you can collect. And so that was the design. The fact that all three of those campaigns have that scenario kind of shows that I was the designer for those campaigns, because it is a common, a technique that I like to use in some of my campaigns. And so you kind of see some of that commonalities in the design. But that does mean that you really have to get very familiar with the source material if you're going to design these campaigns. And so I had to do a lot of research in Francisco Sforza's life and kind of immerse myself in the culture and the politics of Italy at the time. And so really learned a lot. Some members of the team, of the design team, actually have history backgrounds. They actually have studied in college. I'm more of an amateur, didn't actually study it in college, but I am actually a military officer in the United States Marine Corps, actually a logistics officer in the Marine Corps Reserve. And so I think that little pieces of that, of just understanding logistics, actually, plays a part in some of my designs, as well as, understanding some of the tactical aspects of, choke points and, avenues of approach and stuff like that, just for my tactical training. I think it actually contributed to be able to design some of these scenarios and kind of have an tactically interesting gameplay. So that gives some little insight in terms of kind of just how we're structured in terms of designing the campaigns. Actually, I'm a little distracted talking here, so I'm going to get the Arbalester upgrade, a bunch of crossbowmen, get conscription here, accumulating a ton of resources, start turning some kind of Thierry. Since I have so much wood, I'm going to start selling off a lot of wood here to get some more gold. Gold is actually fairly scarce in this scenario, and I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to start being aggressive and taking his bases in order to be able to keep the gold income coming here. So I'm going to keep training some units. In fact, I can also do this. Let me see if I can get another castle up closer to this base here and use that as a forward castle that I can then push from.
Fodio.
Collect all this gold. I
Quando?
need every ounce of gold here. So while I am playing on moderate, I think this is kind of the approach you want to take if you were playing on hard. You want to kind of battle for the sea, just so you can maintain the fishing going and start establishing trade later. And then, oops, yikes. Let's bring all these guys back here. I don't think he's going to survive this plateau. Need to get these units up here, so we start pushing here.
Ein. Caedo. Presto.
Come on, get everybody in here. Defend the town center. Okay, they're doing fine. Castle's still going up, that's not a problem. Army's slowly moving up there. I was saying was even if you're playing this hard, this kind of general approach I think is appropriate to win this scenario. I mean, it's a 1v1. He does have an economy, so probably want to also start rating his economy a bit, just like he's actually rating my economy here pretty well. Get in here. And just kind of slowly, you know, fort castle, stuff like that. Oh, I wish I had murder holes right now. Screw it. I need the murder holes. Come on, get these guys here.
Okay.
Oh, I can't let them take this out. Come on, come on. Get away from the castle. Okay, this castle as well. Pretty strong attack by condos with here. And you notice he's now producing skirmishers as well, just because I have so many arbalesters. He's realizing that. So like I said, the AI will respond to what you're doing here. But fortunately, arbalesters are actually pretty effective against condottieri. Even though they're so strong against gunpowder units, they are vulnerable to archery units. Some more upgrades here. Upgrade my condottieri that I'm still training here. Send some more up here. This as well. I need to build some more barracks.
Condo.
48 jacks. And nothing for the wood though. So we're now his base here. He is training skirmishers. I'm not upgraded to elite though yet.
Salve. Quando? Impero. Fodio. Quando?
This force here. I'm gonna simultaneously attack his base here. I'm gonna get some trebuchets, take out these castles and towers. While these arbalesters actually seem pretty good in terms of taking out the buildings here. Their walls actually are to their direction.
Salve. Odio.
Put down more condos. Again. These guys, okay. Bring my trebuchet here. Destroy this. Another fish here. About to get house. I want to get some houses
Odio.
up.
Ein. Condo.
Impero.
Bring these condos in here. So I can do some damage.
Condo.
Oh, he's already attacking my ship. How many ships here? Yes. So kind of having a, you know, simultaneous battles here on the sea, trying to take out this base here, take out the base in the north, which looks like it's going to fall pretty quickly. To open up this path here, allow me to collect some more gold, hopefully. And these guys here, it's going to be number 2 grouping. Get these guys backpacked. Trying to make a push here for this, destroy this base here. Could probably get my trebuchets up here. I'll probably take out these towers first, though. Okay, this is looking good here. Some idols.
Salve. Fodio.
Salve. Odio.
Okay. Try to get that as well. Oh, that's not ideal. No. south as fast as you can.
Ein.
Oh, some more gold here.
Caedo.
I'm gonna get some more of this because I need gold more than I need wood.
Condo.
So again, if I didn't come here to attack this base, I want to know there's gold here. That's kind of deliberate design choices to kind of encourage players and reward players for being aggressive. Let's see if I can take this out. Perfect. So,
Ein. Presto. Ago.
I don't get too close to the towers.
Comita.
Take this hill here. Very useful. There's a hillock here that allows me to kind of take a good defensive position here. Okay, so now with this base done, I can start moving south here and see what else I can find. Back this up, start going after this castle. Oh, I didn't realize there was a tower here. Oh, it's archer range. Take the castle. It's actually funny with this kind of cliff pass here, these trebuchets are actually protected. Have the archers up here in the hill. Pretty good position. Actually, would be a pretty bad tactical position, but to build a city here. Or a little fortress there. Okay, so I'm gonna keep exploring here. Look like there's no resources here, but I think there's some gold here, so I want to take this position. I know he has a base in this area. I'm gonna go ahead and probably grab a couple of these villagers. Send them here. Ooh, take out this tower. And we're clearing out his base here. I think we can probably move the troops in. Pack this up, get some advancing. We do have a tower up here.
Comita. Impero.
Try to take this one out.
Ein.
Okay, we're taking out this tower.
Impero. Sago.
Keep
Porro.
advancing.
Ein. Sane.
Impero.
This bobcat.
Ein.
These guys build just 2 more houses, so you can hit 200 pop, and then do something else. You see, he has a base here. His towers is fine.
Pugno. Presto. Comita.
They're hunting me there.
Impero. Sane.
Put these guys in there. Kind of losing the naval engagement. That's fine though. We're making so much progress on that.
Ein.
Oh crap! Let's get this trade off, but now I'm going to lose my trebuchets. A couple more.
Presto. Ein.
These guys up here. Looks like I'm going to lose that.
Impero. Pugno. Porro.
This tower.
Presto. Ein.
Some of these guys down here.
Sane.
Ein. Salve.
These guys can build another piece and some more stone. Oh, I didn't need that much, but it's fine.
Presto.
Another TC. Get the
Condo.
resources here.
Ein.
So again, by being aggressive, I'm going to collect these resources here. There's food, there's gold, more wood, and so forth.
Porro. Comita.
Watch out for these cunts here.
Comita.
Can take out the tower. And
Ein. Sane. Pugno. Sane. Porro.
see what's else down here that I can impact. And these guys here, take out the buildings. Take the second force, have them march down this side.
Pugno. Impero.
Pincer movement.
Salve. Presto. Ein. Sane.
Let's
Caedo.
go more
Ein.
wood.
Presto.
Take out the
Pugno.
units.
Impero. Presto.
Okay.
Comita.
Some more stone here that I can use.
Ago.
Okay.
Sane. Porro.
And I believe his economy, you can see a town center here. I can start raiding some of his economy now.
Impero.
These
Porro.
guys here.
Presto.
guys
Ago.
here.
Sane.
It looks like they're still producing units. That's fine. I'm going to keep my
Pugno.
arbalesters here to take on units to protect this trebuchet
Ein.
while using these condottieri to attack his economy here. So you can see that, you know, I talked in the first or in the last video about sometimes why some scenarios have, you know, more fixed enemies that rely on cheating as opposed to a real economy, and why some others don't. You know, sometimes it just makes sense just thematically or design of the level, or just because, you know, you want the map to still look good. You don't want the enemy bases to be completely deforested trees and stuff like that. So you may want to have an AI that primarily actually cheats and relies on resources that way. So there are benefits of that, but I do actually personally prefer to have the AI have an economy.
Pugno.
It does make some things kind of more challenging because if there's a lot of combos. If you have an enemy, which there seems to be concentrating on them, I can actually attack their Stays here. But that does mean it can actually make it sometimes more challenging for a novice player. If a novice player isn't attacking the AI's economy, having an AI that has an economy actually can make scenarios actually harder than if it's just straight up cheating. So it's kind of counterintuitive. You know, how can an AI that cheats and doesn't have economy actually be easier opponent for novice players? It's because a novice player who turtles and isn't very aggressive can sometimes have an easier time because he's not impacting the AI player's economy, as opposed to here, where, you know, I was able to do some damage to his economy, you know, and the sooner you can do damage to the economy, the easier a scenario can end up being when you have an AI like this one that is all economy based. Keep advancing my units here. Got this other trebuchet down here. This base is just about cleared out. Okay. Pack these guys, having destroyed the last building here. Okay. And then try to advance here. And this is a dock that I can trade with. I can actually take control of the sea. Fortunately, we do have this gold mine here. We have that gold mine here, so we're doing fine right now in gold. Tons of wood, so I'm going to sell quite a bit of that. I could probably actually, I think we may have a market. No, you don't actually guess about it. Okay. It's fine. So I also mentioned in the last video how, you know, the backgrounds of Piccinino and Sforza. You know, Piccinino was the son of a butcher. Sforza himself was the son of another condottiero captain. And it's interesting to note just kind of how Italy at this time during the Renaissance, it wasn't a time period when a commoner could actually, you know, make a name for himself and rise up and maybe even become a duke of a city, as we'll see Sforza does. And so it was a very dynamic time for even common peoples. And that's something that honestly with it's one of those things that Forgotten Empires, I think in general, our philosophy has kind of been to kind of shed light on cultures and peoples and histories that have been kind of, you know, forgotten. They're not very famous in the mainstream, you know, any films or TV shows about the Middle Ages. You know, they focus on a few things, right? They focus on things, I should probably need general's crossbow. He doesn't really have cavalry. They focus on things like, you know, like the Vikings and the English and the French, maybe the Mongols, stuff like that. And there's a lot of cultures out there that don't really get represented. So, you know, Forgotten Empires, the first work of Forgotten Empires was the Forgotten DLC, and I introduced some civilizations, obviously like the Italians and the Indians and the Magyars and the Slavs and the Inca that were all not in the original game and by Ensemble Studios. And since then, you know, we've seen expansions like African Kingdoms, Rise of Rajas, that really introduced players to the cultures and civilizations of Sub-Saharan Africa, Saharan Africa, obviously with the Berbers, in Southeast Asia. You know, a lot of players, you know, myself included, I worked on the Burmese campaign, the Baiyang campaign, and I knew nothing about Burmese history. Didn't know who Baiyang was, but then I found out, you know, he was this commoner who rose to the ranks, a very interesting life story, and ended up becoming, ended up ruling the largest empire in Southeast Asian history. That was, you know, even the Chinese and the Mughal sultans in India saw him as almost like an equal to them. So, like, that's something that's really, really telling. And it's surprising, you know, Burma is not really in the public consciousness, especially not in the West. And they have so much interesting history that has kind of been neglected in games. So I think that's one of the great things about Forgotten Empires in terms of what we've been doing is shedding light on some of these kind of underrepresented groups in history. And on the flip side of that, there's the fact that we also shed light on some of underrepresented, I guess, people even, commoners. You can kind of notice that quite a few of the campaigns that have been added since Ensemble Studio signed feature commoners. I believe the original campaigns, Joan of Arc was the only commoner. I mean, El Cid, you know, was a noble and stuff like that. I think Joan was the only actual commoner. But since that time, we've added multiple campaigns. I talked about, you know, pretty much all the campaigns that I've worked on have been actually involving commoners. You know, Francisco de Almeida, obviously Avelo, Baiyang had been a commoner. Francisco Sforza was a commoner. The only one that I worked on who wasn't a commoner was Prithviraj. And so it's kind of nice to be able to see, you know, the impact that people that weren't nobles and kings had on history, and just the challenges that they had to go through. I mean, if you play the Avelo campaign, you see that full force even the Ban Young campaign as well. And so you really see that kind of story of a commoner, even in the Middle Ages, you know, the struggles and tribulations they may have, but their potential, if they were smart enough and savvy enough, and even sometimes just lucky enough, they were able to, you know, be something more than just, in the case of Sforza, the bastard son of a dead contract town, or in the case of Piccinino, just the son of a butcher. It's really interesting times, and it's something that it's nice to really actually feature in a campaign that, you know, usually most campaigns are so focused on kings, and most conceptions of the Middle Ages are so king and queen oriented and nobles, so it's nice to kind of feature some of those as well. So it's like we're winding down here in this scenario. Ooh, I did not mean to do that. And while he does have an economy, and I've pretty much decimated that, he has accumulated enough resources that he can probably keep producing units here, but they're going to run right into a wall of my arbalesters here, while my trebs are able to take out their buildings, their towers, and so forth. This attack kind of stalled. I wonder if I could probably get this back going again. Keep pumping out some more units here. Bring these guys, send some condos up here. Just kind of wither down his defenses here. I'll send a couple of these arbalesters here to see if there's any like miners working. This guy's here. So you see the tides have pretty much turned. I did want to clarify a historical note. I got a comment from one of the first videos about condottiero. What does that mean in Italian? I mentioned in the first video, a condottiero was a contractor or a contract man, because obviously they were mercenary captains who would receive a contract from a duke or a city-state, and then they would then you know, provide military service dictated by the contract. Over time, actually, the user who commented told me that in Italian today, a condottiero doesn't just mean a contractor, though it literally means that it actually has a definition closer to a field commander, which is an interesting change. I talked about in one of the videos how the condottieri really revolutionized medieval warfare in the Renaissance. They really professionalized militaries at the time, and so you can kind of see when men like Sforza, you know, changed the way people fought, ended up becoming a duke himself. A condottiero was no longer seen as being such a negative thing, and it wasn't just a pure contract hound. He was started being seen as someone who was an ideal of military virtue and so forth, and so you saw that change.
I will make you pay for every inch you take from me.
I don't think so, Piccinino. So you kind of see that change over time, just as the condottieri captains became more successful and they professionalized the way that people fought in the time in Renaissance Italy, that you started seeing a term like condottiero start changing its meaning away from just a pure contractor to someone who's like a field commander. So even today, he told me that an Italian condottiero is synonymous with a field commander, but it still kind of has that same meaning in English. So we're going to tear down this gate here so we can actually get closer. He has a castle here. Actually, since I have access to them, I'm going to get the cannon galleon attack. I'm going to make some cannon galleons just so I can attack his base here that's kind of like out here on the lake while advancing his trebs and his arbalesters. I have a pretty strong force of condottieri. I may just take out this tower here and then throw themselves against this area. Come on, take down this gate. We can keep advancing. Use bombard cannon here. This arbalesters, you can see here, he's actually, one virtue of this not being a cheating based AI is because I took out his economy, he's now starting to run out of resources. He's only, you know, his units are coming in here one by one, and he's really struggling now. Possibly using the market to trade. So we're wearing down Piccinino. He had quite a bit of gold here earlier. So we're wearing him out, getting into position, taking out the few units he has. And we're getting close to winding this down. These guys here, throw them down here as well. Start pumping out population limit leech, that's fine.
Salve.
Okay. I think it's worth it to get the elite. I got the resources on that. Okay. Advancing. We're taking off the docks here. Piccinino's on his last legs. He captured a relic earlier. Take out this. Actually, be good to take out this gate here. These guys can get out of the way. Okay. It's looking pretty good. Got 2 cannon galleons that I can use to start taking out this castle here on a little island. So you see kind of like a little choke point for one last push to make it a little more difficult here. As soon as this gate falls, we got these towers, bring these guys in, and we're pretty much winding down Piccinino here. Okay, send this cannon galleon here. Here. Now I want to take a moment though to kind of praise actually the voice actor for the Sforza campaign. You've heard him on the slides. I think he did a fantastic job. One of the challenges I guess as a campaign designer is, you know, you write these dialogues, you write these slides, the story, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that the right voice actor gets hired and the right voice actor says things the right way. I mean, you know, one thing we do is we provide directions to the voice actor, just very simple terms like, you know, this is what you will sound like the personality, the emotion in your voice, stuff like that. But it never always, you know, comes exactly like how you imagine it when you're actually writing the dialogues. But I actually think that the voice actor for the Sforza campaign did a fantastic job. Obviously, I never got to meet this guy. I don't even know his name, to be honest. But it's one of those things that I just want to kind of congratulate him for really evoking the emotion and the voice and the type of character and personality that I wanted this character to have. So I really was glad he kind of had that. I wanted him to evoke kind of like that.
Never over, Sforza. I will haunt you until my last days, and my own sons will carry on my purpose to bring the house of Sforza down to its knees, to the gutter where it belongs.
Last parting words of Piccinino. So we're gonna go back to the slides and get to hear the voice actor I've been praising so much, but he really nailed that kind of like mafioso vibe that I really wanted with the condottieri. We can just real quick look at the map here. I think we pretty much went everywhere, right? I mean, you can see here, obviously this is kind of tactically interesting because you have different avenues of approach here. You can come this way, you can do the direct approach here, but there's this little island here. But very simple scenario, 1v1. It was just a way to showcase some of the dynamic AI that kind of changed his unit composition based on what you did, as well as kind of did a lot of smack talk as well. So let's hope you enjoyed that AI as well. Let's go into this and hear the rest of the story.
The battle between Sforza and Piccinino was the centerpiece of the war over Italy. Sforza served Milan against Piccinino's Neapolitans. And then Piccinino returned to Milan's service while Sforza went to the Venetians. No matter which banners they fought under, the rivalry between the two men became the one constant of the war. But Sforza's Forbizia proved to be decisive. He defeated Piccinino in battles across northern and central Italy. The disgraced Piccinino was finally relieved by Visconti, and spent his last breaths in Milan cursing Sforza's name to his two sons. With his rival and equal finally defeated, Sforza seemed destined to fulfill his grandest ambitions. Then, by a twist of fate, Filippo Visconti died, undoing all of Sforza's plans.
Quite a twist. And we'll now see what's the outcome of that in the next scenario. So I hope you enjoyed this, as we're going to head to the next scenario called Blood and Betrayal. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you're enjoying this Let's Play series, please subscribe, please like the video, please leave a comment. I already mentioned how somebody left a comment, was able to touch on some of the stuff he said, as well as provide some more, change some of the stuff I talked about just based on that feedback. So again, I'm very open to feedback. If you're enjoying this series, if you want to see me talk about different things, if you want me to talk a little more about the history, let me know. If you want me to talk a little bit more about design choices or design process, let me know as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for the next one as we go into the next scenario here called Blood and Betrayal.